For 10 long years, the billionaire's mansion had felt more like a silent museum than a home. The halls were polished, the windows spotless, and the rooms filled with expensive furniture, but none of it mattered. What truly defined the place was the quiet. A heavy quiet. A painful quiet. The billionaire's daughter hadn't spoken a single word since she was a little child. Not a whisper. Not a hum. Not even a cry. She simply lived inside her own world, moving softly like a shadow, always calm, always distant. People whispered about it, behind closed doors. She must not remember how to speak anymore, some said. Maybe she doesn't want the world, others suggested. But her father knew the truth. Something had broken her, a moment so deep that even his fortune could not repair it. He tried everything. Doctors from around the world. Therapists with the best reputations. Special schools. Private teachers. Emotional programs. Art therapy. Music therapy. Animal therapy. Nothing brought even a single sound from her lips. Sometimes, late at night, her father walked past her room and paused at her door. He wanted to hear her breathing, just to feel reassured she was still with him. He always hoped maybe tomorrow would be the day. But every morning was the same. Silence. Then came the day everything quietly shifted. It was a warm afternoon. Sunlight spread across the mansion gardens like a soft gold cloth. The girl sat on her usual garden bench, her hands resting still on her lap, her eyes lost somewhere beyond the flowers. The staff knew the routine. She liked the outdoors, even if she never showed emotion. That same day, the mansion had hired help from outside the city. One of the workers was a young black boy, no older than 13 or 14. His clothes were simple, his backpack old and patched, but his eyes held a kind of steady warmth that came from growing up around struggle, not comfort. He had been assigned to clean part of the garden path. He didn't expect anything unusual. To him, the job meant helping his family earn a little extra for rent and food. That alone was enough motivation. When he entered the garden, he saw the girl sitting quietly. At first, he didn't think she noticed him. Most rich families ignored workers anyway. But something made him glance again. To his surprise, she was staring at him, not just looking, truly staring. As if she were studying him, trying to understand something about him that even he didn't know. He paused for a second, unsure what to do. His broom stopped halfway mid-air. Usually, he kept his head down and didn't make eye contact with wealthy people. But something about her expression didn't feel cold or judging. It felt curious. He gave her a small, polite smile, more out of habit than confidence. She blinked. A slow, gentle blink. The staff watching from the distance nearly gasped. They had never seen her react that way to anyone. She rarely lifted her eyes, let alone held a gaze. But the boy didn't know any of that. He simply returned to sweeping, thinking she was just being polite. A few minutes later, he felt a presence behind him. When he turned his head slightly, he saw her standing there, just a few steps away watching him work. It startled him. No one ever watches me, he thought. He wasn't sure if he should speak. He didn't want to get in trouble for bothering the billionaire's daughter. So he kept his voice low and gentle. "You like the garden?" he asked quietly. She didn't respond. Not with words. But she tilted her head slightly, almost as if the question meant something to her. He smiled again, more genuinely this time. "I like it too," he said. "Feels peaceful." For a moment, neither of them moved. It was not uncomfortable. It was calming, as if she felt something safe around him. A soft breeze moved her hair. Her eyes softened. Her breathing changed, just a little, like her body was waking up from a long sleep. She slowly sat back on her bench, but her eyes didn't leave him. She watched him gently push fallen leaves aside, watched him wipe sweat from his forehead, watched him hum quietly under his breath. And for the first time in 10 years, she didn't feel completely alone. Something inside her, something small, but alive, stirred. The mansion staff didn't understand it. Her father didn't know it yet. But the moment had already begun. The wall she had built around her heart had finally cracked. The next morning, the garden felt different. The air carried a soft warmth, the kind that makes flowers open before the sun fully rises. The mansion staff moved quietly, but even they felt something had changed since the poor boy came the day before. They weren't sure what it was, but the girl's expression had been lighter, just a little, when she returned indoors. Her father noticed it too. When she walked into the dining hall that morning, her steps seemed less heavy. She even paused by the window, as if listening to the birds outside. She hadn't done that in years. He didn't say anything. He didn't want to disturb whatever tiny shift was happening. Meanwhile, far from luxury, the boy woke up in his small room in a cramped building. His family lived in a neighborhood where the walls were thin and the mornings were noisy with street sounds. But that day, he woke with a strange excitement. He didn't fully understand why. Maybe it was the peaceful garden. Maybe it was the fresh air. Or maybe it was the quiet girl who had watched him with those thoughtful, soft eyes. He didn't know her story. He didn't know she hadn't spoken in 10 years. He didn't know she rarely reacted to anyone. But he did know one thing: she seemed lonely. And loneliness was something he understood too well. He packed his old backpack, ate a quick breakfast, and left for the mansion. His shoes were worn out, but he walked with purpose. The job was small, only a few hours of cleaning and helping around the garden, but it meant food on the table. Every little bit mattered. When he arrived, the head groundskeeper handed him the same broom as yesterday and pointed toward the garden. He walked in with calm steps. He didn't expect to see her right away, but she was already there, sitting on the same bench, hands resting gently on her lap, eyes waiting. Yes, waiting. She wasn't looking at flowers. She wasn't staring into empty space. She was turned toward the path where he always came from, as if she knew he would appear. The moment their eyes met, something subtle passed between them. A tiny spark of recognition. Not friendship, at least, not yet, but something like it. Something new. He smiled, shy but warm. "Good morning," he whispered. She didn't blink or look away. Instead, she straightened a little, as if acknowledging him in her own silent language. He started his work, sweeping leaves and picking small branches that had fallen overnight. But unlike yesterday, he felt aware of her presence behind him. It wasn't uncomfortable. It felt comforting, like having someone nearby who didn't judge him. He worked for a few minutes before speaking again. "You're up early today," he said softly, not turning around. She didn't move, but he felt her attention sharpen. "You like mornings?" he asked. She slowly lowered her gaze to the ground, then lifted it again. Not a nod, not a gesture, just a quiet shift of her eyes. But that was enough for him. Enough to understand that she was listening, even if she couldn't or wouldn't speak. He gently leaned the broom against a tree and sat a short distance away from her. Not too close, not too far. Just enough to make her feel safe. "You know," he said, picking up a small flower from the ground, "when I was younger, mornings were the hardest. My mom worked nights, so I didn't see her much. I used to wake up alone." She watched him carefully. His voice wasn't loud or dramatic. It was honest, simple, the kind of tone a person uses when telling the truth without expecting anything in return. He continued, "I learned to keep myself busy. Cleaning, helping neighbors, doing whatever I could. It made me feel less empty, I guess." Her fingers twitched slightly, such a small movement, but filled with emotion. Almost as if she understood that feeling too well. He looked at her, not with pity, but with understanding. "I think everyone feels alone sometimes," he said. "Even people who live in big houses." Her breathing grew slower, deeper. Her eyes softened again, She shifted closer on the bench, not much, but enough that the staff watching from far away exchanged surprised glances. For 10 years, she had never moved toward anyone. The boy didn't notice the staff. He was focused on her. He gently placed the small flower on the bench beside her, not touching her. Not invading her space, just offering something simple. "It's for you," he whispered. She looked at the flower, then at him. For a moment, her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with a fragile emotion she hadn't shown in years. She reached out slowly and touched the flower with her fingertips. It was the smallest action. Yet it said more than words. He smiled again. "You don't have to talk," he said kindly. "I'm okay with silence." Her lips parted slightly, not enough to speak, but enough to show that silence wasn't her shield at that moment. It was simply her way of existing. The boy stood up and returned to his work. She continued watching him, now with a softer expression. Not just curiosity, trust. A tiny seed of trust. For the rest of the morning, she stayed near him. She didn't wander off. She didn't retreat into her private world. She stayed. And for the first time in a decade, someone had reached the quietest part of her heart. Without force, without fear, without pressure. Just kindness, just presence. Just a boy who understood loneliness. The garden felt calmer that afternoon. Sunlight filtered through the tall trees, painting the ground with warm, golden patches. The girl sat quietly on her bench, hands folded on her lap, eyes following the boy as he moved along the flower beds. Unlike yesterday, she didn't just glance at him, she watched him carefully. Noticing small details, how he bent to pull weeds, how his hands moved quickly yet gently. The way he hummed softly as he worked. The boy didn't notice her staring at first. He was used to being ignored in most places he went, so attention was rare, especially from someone living in such a luxurious world. But when he finally sensed her gaze, he paused and gave a small, unassuming smile. "You're really good at this," she said, her first words in 10 years. The staff nearby froze. Her father's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't a shout or a loud exclamation, but the soft, timid sound of her voice was unmistakable. The boy turned quickly, startled, but not alarmed. Thank you," he said softly, unsure if he had actually heard her right. She didn't speak again immediately. Instead, she blinked slowly, as if deciding whether she should continue. The boy smiled gently and returned to his work, careful not to pressure her. The connection between them grew stronger. He began talking to her while he worked, sharing simple things about his life, stories of small triumphs, and even little frustrations. He didn't expect her to respond, he didn't even try, but she listened. And listening was already a huge step. "You know," he said one morning, "when I was little, I used to hide behind the walls of our apartment. I thought nobody cared. But then my little sister smiled at me one day, and it changed everything. I realized I could matter to someone, even if I felt invisible." She tilted her head slightly. Her eyes softened. She didn't speak, but the way she followed him with her gaze told him she was absorbing every word. Days passed. Each day, she began moving just a little closer to him, and he welcomed it without comment. The boy noticed her subtle gestures, the way she leaned slightly forward when he spoke, the way her hands twitched nervously when she tried to mimic his actions, or how she watched his expressions carefully, as if learning how to smile again through him. The father watched from a distance. He had tried every expert and technique for 10 years, spending millions to reach his daughter. And yet, it took a boy with no wealth, no degrees, and no special training to make progress where they had all failed. One afternoon, the boy stopped sweeping and sat on the grass near the girl. The bench was wide, but he chose to sit slightly on the ground, showing he wasn't trying to invade her space. "I don't have much to offer," he said quietly, "but I promise I'll be here. I won't make you talk if you don't want to. I'll just be here." Her breathing grew steady. She tilted her head to one side, watching him. Then, she lifted her hand, hesitated, and let it rest lightly on the edge of the bench near him. It was a tiny gesture, almost invisible, but it carried the weight of 10 years of silence, he noticed. He didn't speak, didn't move too quickly. He simply looked at her hand and gave the smallest nod, as if to say, "I see you. I understand." Over the next few days, a pattern formed. He would tell stories. She would listen. She began experimenting with small sounds, soft hums, or whispered syllables. The boy encouraged her, but never forced her. Sometimes he would simply whistle lightly, and she would attempt to mimic it. Sometimes she would repeat one simple word, never more than that, but progress was there. Her father began keeping a careful journal of these moments. Each tiny interaction, each hesitant sound, each gaze shared was recorded. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer advice. He simply watched and let the boy work his quiet magic. The girl's trust in him grew, so strong that she began leaving her bedroom and wandering into the garden during his work hours. She didn't hide anymore. She didn't retreat at the first sound of footsteps. She stayed. One afternoon, as a soft breeze moved her hair across her face, the boy noticed her trying something different. She held a small leaf between her fingers, examining it as he had examined flowers, and then made a soft, almost imperceptible sound. It wasn't a word. Not yet, but it was progress. The boy stopped his work and looked at her with gentle encouragement. "That's great," he whispered. "Keep going. You can do it." She looked up at him, eyes wide, and smiled just a little. That smile was enough to light the entire garden, to make the mansion staff forget the grandeur around them, and to remind the father why he had never given up hope. For the first time in 10 years, the girl wasn't just present in her silence. She was participating in life, learning again how to connect. One tiny sound at a time. And all of it, the boy realized, was happening because he treated her like a person first, not a problem. He didn't demand words. He didn't lecture her. He simply shared pieces of his life, showing her that kindness could exist without expectations. That day, the girl's heart felt lighter. The walls that had trapped her voice for a decade were beginning to crumble, not through money, not through therapy, but through gentle, patient human connection. And as she watched him work, humming softly, she felt the stirrings of something she hadn't felt in years: hope.